Hello, everyone, and welcome to Stress Free IEP, the show where we help families build their villages to raise their neurodivergent children with confidence and support. I'm your host, Frances Schefter, special education attorney, advocate, and fellow parent walking this journey with you. Each week, we shine a light on professionals, resources, and real world strategies that can empower you to navigate the IEP process and beyond. Whether you're tuning in live on Facebook or YouTube or listening later on your favorite podcast app, we are so glad you're here. Please also feel free to ask questions if you're watching live or in the comments section. In the comment section, we promise to respond. And let's dive in and meet today's amazing guest. Janelle McCarthy is a licensed professional counselor, registered play therapist, former public school teacher, and diehard fan of tea. She has over a decade of hands-on experience working with children and their families and is dedicated to providing neurodiversity affirming care to people of all ages. Janelle is a neuroscience geek who can talk for hours about regulation, mirror neurons, and felt safety. She has paired this with her knowledge about neurodiversity and translated this into her passion project, inclusion coaching. In her free time, Janelle loves to go for walks, host themed dinner parties with friends, and engage with lots and lots of fan fiction. Janelle, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Frances. So great to be here.
So I want to dive into inclusion coaching because that's something I haven't heard before, and I'm sure most of our listeners haven't either.
Yeah. So, you make a great point in that it's a term we kind of made up. I had this germ of an idea, and the longer I sat with it, the more passionate I got, the more convinced like this is a need. I think the hardest part will be finding the name that makes sense to everyone. So I'd love to give you a little intro. So I started off as a public school teacher. I love kids. I've always been a kid person. Then my career shifted and I came into being a therapist. And I was like, of course I'm going to work with kids. I love children. And what I learned is that, yes, I love working with children. And yes, children need direct services. But a huge part of supporting children is working with their caregivers. And so even though I have several hours of play therapy slots on my calendar each week, a lot of my schedule is filled by doing caregiver support. And what I found is that is how we often bridge the gap between short-term and long-term goals to helping our kids. And so I made a lot of stride doing parenting support and caregiver support. But what I noticed was that often there was a sense of isolation that the families felt. There was a sense of fear of their child getting thrown out of extracurriculars because their needs were misunderstood and then tried to shut the behaviors down rather than understand why a behavior was cropping up. And so I wanted to widen the net rather than just working with caregivers. I was like, what if I pivot? What if I go to the other side of the equation and provide some of that same support that I do to caregivers around, hey, here's what's probably going on in your kid's brain. Here's what it has to do with regulation and felt safety. How can we take that knowledge and not become permissive with it, not say, oh, I understand it, so it's okay. Sometimes the behaviors aren't okay. But let's take that understanding and use that to come up with a plan of like, okay, kiddo's got a need, larger group has a need. How can we do that, meet both needs in a respectful way that's sustainable for all involved parties? So inclusion coaching is about supporting entities, whether that's a religious school, a scout troop, an athletics coach, anyone that also works with children and needs support in better understanding what is going on when behaviors are coming up and how can we support in a neurodiversity affirming way that is sustainable and fair to all involved parties.
And I love that because it's so true. It's behavior is communication. I say that all the time. It's no kids act bad because they want to act bad. There's something there, right? And like what's there and what's going on once we figure that out. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on that I love that you said is that with the neurodiversity, we're not excusing all behaviors because of the disability. It's some behaviors are not acceptable. We understand where it's coming from, but we need to process that. So do you have some pointers for parents that are like, because, I hear with the PDA families,
Yeah.
like, well, my kid's beating us up all the time, or my kid's beating up the kid all the time. But what am I supposed to do? That's the PDA.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for raising this, because it's such a relevant point and dilemma for many of the families that I serve as well. And I think I've become a lot more assertive as the more years I have under my belt. We have to find solutions that are sustainable. You're going to hear me say that word a gazillion more times today. It's really important to understand what's going on with a child, right? And I think when I was operating first as a teacher and then as a new therapist, I was prone, as I think many of us are when we're new in positions, to like kind of put our blinders on and like, this is what I know, and I can't lose sight of this, right? And especially if someone else doesn't have the knowledge or the perspective that we're bringing to the conversation, right? If they're saying, for example, this child needs a behavior plan and they need to have rewards and punishments and all these things, that I'm like, no, let's, how many hours do you have? We can talk about, why we're not going to do that, why that won't work, right? But so I, came in, don't punish kids for these things, that like they're not doing it volitionally, right? We have to understand. And that's true. However, if we stay there, then first of all, we're doing a disservice to the child, because we're not being respectful of their agency, right? And especially when we're talking about PDA families, right? A PDA has a nervous system that's really, really sensitive, and there are going to be more things that their nervous system is more sensitive to, very acutely so, than their non-PDA peers. That is the reality. However, how disempowering is it to say, well, that's how your life is? No, how about, okay, let's understand what's going on. This is your challenge. Where are pockets of agency for you? Where are some ways that we can slow down your nervous system, that we can have like activities that feel okay to do, that are grounding for you, right? And we can slowly build capacity around responses. And so so understanding is where we start. We don't want to do a disservice to the kids. We don't want to say that's all you can do. And we also don't want to burn caregivers out. We don't want to build family resentment for the siblings, right? And so I think a piece of advice that I want to offer here is we have to look at things in stages. Often when I meet people, and I would imagine some of when you meet people, is when families are in burnout, right?
Yeah.
That is not the time that we're going to start really growth-oriented work. That stage of work is about recovery, right?
Yeah.
But when recovery has had the time and space that it needs, then we need to be honest about, okay, we're in a different stage now. We have a different priority. And that's not to say we throw everything that we learned about recovery out the window, right? But we do it in stages, and we look for patterns over time to find footholds of opportunity to make things more doable for all involved.
Right. And that's where the trauma informed comes in also. It's, interestingly, I was just working with somebody on my website, and we're talking about trauma informed. And I was like, I don't know if I want to do trauma informed. And she pointed out, she's like, but Francie, most of our neurodiverse kids have had some sort of trauma at home, at school, not intentionally inflicted trauma like you would abuse, neglect type situation, but some sort of trauma. And it's the reaction, the reflex of like, well, previously this happened, so now I'm going to act like this because of that. And so how do we kind of realize this isn't always going to happen? Not all teachers do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And get to
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think some of what I'm hearing you talk about is like, we need to have those corrective experiences. And this kind of comes back to what we were just talking about with like pacing and knowing what stage you're in. Because someone can, like a new teacher, right? Without the history, without the same ways of patterns of engagement, they can come in and do everything right, everything recommended. And if the child's nervous system is still in a highly activated state, if there hasn't been repair work, if there hasn't been acknowledgement of what happened, if there isn't enough collaboration and buy-in on the next step in the new teacher, then right isn't going to get you far, because our nervous systems are wired to keep us all safe. And we are primed to default to, it might be dangerous. It might be dangerous. I have to protect myself, right? And so having an understanding that I think it was Robin Goebel that taught when she talks about perception or neuroception. We have streams of the past and the present that flow into one river. And so part of why I emphasize pacing so much is because we have a whole lot of past that walks into our doorstep when we meet people, right? And so if we come in with knowledge and not context and not relationship, then that past is going to stay the primary factor. But if we can say, okay, there's no rush, there's no agenda, I want to be present, I want to send as many cues of safety as I can, that repetition over time earns trust, not just emotional trust, not just I think I can trust you in a cognitive way, right? But that felt safety, that neuroception neuroception of safety, and then over time, the stream of the past and the stream of the present can become a little more equal in size, or the present can, with those corrective experiences, become a place where there is more opportunity for a fresh start or a new experience that we're not going to have the same reaction.
Right. What first came up to me when you were talking about the new teacher is that a new teacher does a great job in front of the whole class to a kid. Mm-hmm. And for some kids, that's great. Mm-hmm. For some kids, you have just totally triggered them. Yeah. And not even knowing because now all of a sudden the kid's triggered and is whatever happens, and the teacher has no clue.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the thing. And so is it a behavior? No, it was a trigger. And so how do we adjust that? How do we get to that? Which clearly it should be on the IEP, but let's be real. Does it make it, and does everybody read it?
Right. Well, and part of what I was thinking as you were sharing that is this is why relationship is so important, right? Yes, we want documentation to be as crisp as it can be. We want as much knowledge to inform how we engage as we can. And relationship is the heart of everything. Relationship, even if not especially with our PDAers, right? It's less about techniques. Yes, techniques can be a starting place and a tool. And I think it's really a helpful way to slow us down as caregivers and start thinking very intentionally and give us something to hold on to in a dynamic that probably caught us off guard, that, until you've learned about PDA, you're like, what is happening, right? But it's not so much about the techniques. It's so much more about the relationship and about the trust. And even when I, ask a direct question and then I'm like, I wonder if I just put you on the spot, feel free to disregard, right? When we've had enough interactions that they know that they can tell me no, that I'm going to take accountability when I make a mistake, that they can call me out on making a mistake, and it's not going to irrevocably rupture our relationship. That I think is where we can make some real stride. And I also think in terms of relationship, I promised I'd come back to that word sustainable. We need our community, right? And that's I think the whole point of this podcast. And caregivers need support and relationships and trust to keep nourishing their nervous systems as they're sharing their nervous systems with their kids. So the community piece and relationship can't be undervalued.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time, the building your village, because so many of us caregivers are the caregiver, I help co-regulate both my children, and I know that, and I help co-regulate, somewhat with all of my clients and stuff. And when do I take time for me? And the burnout for caregivers is real too. Mm-hmm. And taking the step. And that's 100% why this podcast came around, is let's build our village, because God knows we need help. There was a meme one time I saw that it says, it takes a village to raise a family. So does this village come knock on the door? Where is this village? Where'd they go? But it's coming in, and it's understanding, I know I'm the safe place for my child, because she knows she can cuss me out. I mean, is it appropriate? No, but she knows when she's that dysregulated, it's okay. And I'm going to still love her and hug her, and it's going to be okay. And she can tell me I'm the worst parent ever. And I know she knows it's not true. And, the interesting thing, going to that one, she has said that numerous times, that I'm the worst parent ever. And so my response would be like, yeah, I know, I'm such a bad parent. And that usually shuts her up. No, you're not. Well, you're the one that said it, like, and it's just so funny how like I've learned to stay calm, and my response has learned to kind of bring her out of that dysregulation moment of like, I'm just repeating what you said to me.
It
And then
sounds like
it's,
in some way, like the original novelty helped kind of break the moment in a positive way, and now it's become like a familiar and preferred routine. It sounds like there are those, again, like there are pockets of felt safety opportunities everywhere. Often
yeah.
we just stumble into them. It's not like there's a textbook that can just teach us the way. But I love that anecdote. I think it shows like your own journey of learning like what's going to work best, when to be reactive and when not. um yeah.
Yeah, it's always fun. It's funny because it's like for me, she doesn't say that anymore. And
Mm.
the other one that was always she always tells me I hate you. Like, good that I'm doing my job as a parent. And
Mm.
she hates when I say that. But it's true, like when are kids going to hate us when we're setting boundaries that they don't want?
Well, and I think, I love that we're talking about like having difficult conversations with our family, because I think, especially back to that point about understanding is the starting point and not the finish line. I think this is I think this is the next wave of our work in like a PDA affirming community. We have to keep cultivating non-shaming language to talk about these experiences. Just because someone has a particular support need, whether it's PDA or like a different presentation of autism or ADHD, or pick your part of neurodiversity, right? Just because there's an underlying support need does not mean that like that's where the story ends. But if we excuse, well, they can't help it, that's an area where their nervous system is vulnerable. If we stop it there, then we make it taboo, and then we
Yeah,
contribute to shame. And we also are burning ourselves out because we're trying to often invalidate our own feelings of this is hard, why are they like this to me, what did I do wrong, what do I need to do better, all these questions that are so normal and also so counterproductive, right?
yeah,
But if we can say like, if well, if we can model our own hard times, right, not putting our burdens on our children, but just modeling like, you know what, oh, I was cold today because I thought that I packed my mittens and I forgot my mittens and I was cold, and that made me grumpy and uncomfortable because when my body's not okay, the rest of me can't be okay. So I needed to like figure that out before I left the house again, right? If we can just model making a mistake, a little bit of problem solving, getting upset, when we model that, we're destigmatizing it, because so often the identified client in the family feels so like spotlighted. You have
right.
need, you need support, right? But when we can talk about no, 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 all of us have needs, all of us need support, all of us, right? And so, okay, your particular like constellation of needs, yeah, probably different than most of your peers. We're not gonna deny that. Doesn't make you any more or less worthy of love, right? But we have to find a way to talk about, oh yeah, that was a pretty rough meltdown. What do you need right now? Right? We're not saying
Yeah,
it's okay, it didn't happen. No, it did happen. And it did have
right.
repercussions. And that doesn't mean we don't love the kid. And we doesn't mean that we're going to punish the kid, right? Because again, we're going to incorporate that understanding, but it's not wiping things away. We have to find a way to talk about what's really going on. And I think that is both the challenge and the exciting part for families of like cultivate your own language. Like I often try to bend over backwards to tell people like, this is Janelle language. It may fit you. It probably won't, because you're not me, right? So here's a
Yeah,
starting point. Take what works and build your own, but finding ways to talk about what's really going on in non-shaming, non-blaming ways also opens the door wider for kids to collaborate in the problem solving around what's going on, what's not working, what's needed. Um,
right.
yeah.
And it comes down to, like, of course, what I think about a lot of people say is like, well, if they're getting away with it at school and they're not getting punishment, then what's going to happen when they're out in the real world?
Mm.
And it's like, but we're not letting them get away with it. We can give consequences, but we also need to understand the why and like have that explanation. Like, okay, so you did this and we understand because this need wasn't met. But now, because you did this is making this happen for other people. And that's why we need to give you some space to be away and give them some space. So you need to stay home for a day or two for suspension to figure, you know what I mean? So if it's explained in that way, not of you hit this kid, you're getting suspended,
Right.
then it makes it the learning experience it should be.
Definitely. I also think when we're talking about the real world, it's important to frame things as, again, kind of that pacing or that timeline piece, because often a very genuine and understandable fear that many of the parents that I work with bring is like, well, what's going to happen if they do this when they have a job? Like, they're going to get fired. They won't be able to, have an income and sustain themselves. And so as a therapist, my first like stop there is like, is meeting them with compassion. Like, you really care about your kid. You want them to do well in life, to be okay. You're worried about their future, right? Like, let's hold some space for those feelings, right? And when we've had some time and space to do that, and we talk about, who else can you process some of this with in between now and the next time we're meeting again, because chances are it's going to come up again, right? When we have those conversations, then I like to shift over to stop number 2, which is, okay, so you're wanting them to have a successful future, right? And they're like, yeah, okay. And you're defining successful in this way as like gainfully employed, able to navigate conflicts in the workplace. Okay, got a second nod, got it, okay. Then I'm like, okay, so we need to think about it in terms of scaffolding and setting like manageable expectations so that they can be successful and kind of build on that momentum, right? In the same way that we don't just like throw like Shakespeare at a toddler and be like, read so you can go to college, right?
Right.
We need to set expectations and put the supports in place for kids to be able to thrive. And so sometimes when something is kind of goes wrong, there's a conflict at school, someone gets hurt, there's a right, we need to like reassess, are the correct kind of structures in place for that to happen? And then we also need to zoom out and say like, okay, right now we can't be worrying about gainful employment. They're 7 or they're 15 or they're whatever. Our first task is helping them to regulate. It's to gather self-knowledge about, what does it feel like in your body when you feel regulated? What are the signs that you're starting to get dysregulated, right? So yes, we can work on impulse control. Yes, we can work on, using your words, but that's going to come later. We need to work on the foundational skills first so that we can build the staircase for success in the future. So that real world concern, I'm right there with you. I'm just wanting to start caregiver a little further back is generally where I go with it.
Well, and it's also looking at what is the future, what is the reality. People are like, I hate it when principals like, well, we can't move classes because they're going to have to learn how to get along with, bosses that they don't like.
Yeah.
Well, but there's not the situation. They need to be able to learn. And if they're not learning because of the way this teacher is teaching, we're not saying something's wrong with the teacher. We just need a different environment, A. And B, guess what? If they're in the workforce and they don't like their boss, guess what's going to happen? They're going to quit and go find another job.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't have to learn how to work with that type of person if the personalities don't mix, and people say all the time, like, well, they're going to have to learn how to, do things they don't want to do. I'm like, yeah, they are, but not right now.
Well,
Right?
and I also think, again, like pacing is so important. This is why I love being a play therapist, right? Because often, I mean, I work with people kind of across the lifespan, but I would say my most frequently grouped age range is upper elementary school. And so things like impulse control, things like using their words, things like not being bowled over by an emotion. Those are generally like the starting points where parents are like, okay, they need to go to therapy because this is becoming an issue. And like, they're standing out more from their peers than when this was an issue when they were 4 or 5 or 6, right? And so all of those like skills or goals are appropriate within reason. But how people think we're going to get there is usually where I have to be like, fun fact, we don't do a ton of talking in play therapy. We do a lot of playing, right?
Right.
Because something like, so, okay, for those of you who haven't gotten to be in the magic of a playroom before, a lot of the work that we do is in the setup. What tools do we have available? Gary Landreth, who's like the father of play therapy, he said something to the effect of, toys are their words and play is their language.
Mhm.
And I love that, because what it really says, first of all, is like, to echo what you had started with, Francis, like, behavior is communication. So what are we gravitating towards? What thematically is being played out? But also, like, what function is a certain type of play like filling? Um, and so when we have the playroom set up with expressive arts materials, we have the playroom set up with fidgets and regulatory toys, we have the playroom set up with competitive games, we have the playroom set up with pretend play tools, right? And so some kids gravitate towards one type of play over the other. For example, if they're like, okay, we're going to play Clue today. Okay, we're going to be building distress tolerance by taking turns, by not being able to take as many spaces unless we've like negotiated that, like, okay, we're going to play it. So if I roll a 6, but I want a 10, I can take a 10. Okay, if that's what we set up, like, cool, roll with it. Like, fine. But if not, right, we're taking turns. We're cultivating the ability to sit with, I don't know the answer. I know part of it and I don't have it all figured out. Gosh, isn't that so much of adult life? I know some of the answer and I don't have it all figured out, right? And how
Right.
do we sit in that tension? And so something as simple as a board game can create a titrated amount of challenge that the child can handle, and that allows them to grow in that area. And then because there's growth there, then they're able to handle a higher level of challenge in the future, right? So we have to meet
Right.
kids where they're at, and for many people, play is that appropriate match.
Right. And I'm just thinking, like, I'm assuming during play therapy, you do the modeling of like, oh man, I needed a 2 when I rolled a 6. How frustrating is that? Oh, well, maybe next time, and
Mhm.
like talking, talking out loud what's going in your brain.
Precisely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because again, um, often the kids that I get to work with, they feel like there's a spotlight on them. I'm
Mhm.
different. I'm the one that needs help. I'm the one that gets angry. And it's like, well, you have been spotlighted, but guess what? Everything you described is part of the human experience. And I want to show you that it is safe to say I'm mad, because something that I've seen a lot is when I ask kids very conversational, like, oh, how's it going? Or how you doing today? The way they seem to perceive it is, how are you? Are you good or are you bad? Not like, are you doing well, but like, are you good or bad?
Yeah.
And so they're always good. They're always fine. There's nothing going on. And I'm like, oh, wow, I'm so surprised, because normally my day has like a mix of like highs and lows. Like today, my high was that, I made my blueberry oatmeal and it's my favorite. And my low was that my blueberry oatmeal took too long to clean up and I was a little late for work. And that was like kind of like nerve wracking. Right. And so it wasn't like the worst thing ever, but highs and lows all day. Right. And so by normalizing that and painting the picture and really teasing out, like, something can be bad or you can feel bad and that doesn't make you bad.
Yeah.
I want to create opportunities for it to feel safe to be like, you know what, I'm kind of crummy right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, some days that's
And
how
that's
it
okay.
is.
Yeah. And I don't feel like doing anything. And that's okay.
And that's okay.
Pajama days, we call them.
Yep.
Like,
Yep.
I just want to be in my pajamas and eat junk food and watch movies all day long. And that's okay. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about like times that going back and admitting when you do something wrong,
Mhm.
like, and I'm thinking back like as a teacher and as a parent and like times that I've like maybe the punishment was a little bit stronger than it should have been because I was dysregulated and going back and saying, you know what? I've thought about it, and this might not have been the best punishment. So, how can we renegotiate it? What do you think is better? And it's also giving them, I'm just thinking, my daughter, something happened. I'm trying to remember. Like she was very late for something, and I was like, you know what? You have this amount of time, and what you choose to do with it is fine. But this is what's going to happen at this time. And if you're not ready at this time, then you're going to have to miss the birthday party. And she wasn't ready at that time, so I said, no, you're going to miss the birthday party. She was very, very upset because it was her first birthday party,
Mm.
and very, very upset. And so finally, she came to me. She goes, Mom, what if I give up my phone and my tablet for a week? Can I go to the birthday party? And I said, you think that's fair? She goes, yes. Okay, then we'll switch it. So,
Well,
right? Like say what you mean and mean what you say, but like she just came in and negotiated of like, Mom, like missing this birthday party is not something she can do later.
mm,
And she wants to be there because this is somebody we've known for a little while, and like she just wants to celebrate the first birthday. And I'm like, and I thought about it, I'm like, you know what, you're right. And so we can switch that.
And I love that example of like humility on your part of like, okay, just because I've got your back and generally that means I provide the structure doesn't mean that we can't be in conversation. Doesn't mean that we can't revisit things. The fact that your daughter was able to highlight like, you know what's really valuable to me? Going to this party, being a part of this community in that moment, and then your own recollection of like, okay, I want her to understand there are consequences for actions, and particularly natural consequences of like we may not be able to get there on time or we may not whatever, right? But she's articulating what is valuable to her, and you're recognizing there's not going to be a second first birthday party, right?
Right.
And so kind of taking stock of like, oh, okay, that's actually a really good point. And is this the hill I want to die on? Because you only get to die on so many hills. So
Right. Exactly.
yeah.
And what's fair, and like, is that behavior going to change? But it's also me going back to thinking about my behavior
Mhm.
that might have, like that's in my house, that's the biggest challenge. My husband and I are the type of, if you have to be somewhere at 12 o'clock, if you're there at 12 o'clock, you're late,
Mhm.
you know?
Yep.
And my daughter is, we're leaving at 12 o'clock. At 12 o'clock, oh, where are my shoes? Where's my jacket? Even though for an hour, we've been like, you got an hour, you got 30 minutes, you got 20, and all of that. And it makes us crazy. And so like, what are the consequences of that? That you can, that's the challenge for us, at least, of like, seriously, like, what are the consequences? Leave her home. Okay. That, she's at the age that we can do that now.
Yeah.
And trust me, we've been driving down the driveway with her in her shoes and socks and jacket in hand and running barefoot after us. Wait, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, and part of what I'm thinking is like you're giving a great case example of looking at patterns and then using proactive and reactive responses, right? I often talk about, especially as a teacher, I learned the importance of setting things up as best you can proactively, because once things get to a certain point of dysregulated, like you got to ride it out. Like there's no logicking, there's no back and forth
Yeah.
and like productive conversation. Like it is what it is now, right? And
Yeah.
so when we can set things up, that's our best bet. And welcome to the real world. All the prevention in the world will not take us all the way. And that's okay. That doesn't mean we shouldn't use prevention and like environmental design and pattern, recognition and stuff to our advantage. But we have to plan for both. And when you were talking about like how you and your husband and have one time orientation, your daughter has a different time orientation, it just reminded me of like, yep, having realistic expectations has been such a game changer for me. I too am like, if we're meeting at 12, I'm gonna get there at 11:45, and if I'm there at 11:50, I'm gonna feel like I'm late, and I'm gonna be nervous about, right? Like, did they
Yeah.
miss me? I don't see them there yet, right? Like, I can go the other end. And but if I know that, for example, like someone coming late or not responding or something is something that is particularly activating for me, then part of my like regulation plan is, okay, what do I need to be okay with that? And sometimes the answer is I can't be okay with that and I need to make that known. But more often than not, it's okay, I'm going to set myself a timer and I won't let myself reach out until, X time. Or, okay, I know that movement helps me. So while I'm waiting, I'm going to put a song on and kind of dance around and get some of that regulatory input that way. Or, right, who can I vent to? Who can I, right? And so thinking about some of those things in advance, knowing my own like kind of raw spots has helped me to better kind of navigate them, because it has to be a combination of all angles of support.
Right. It just reminded me of when I was in my 20s, I had a friend that was always late, and we would like plan to meet at the movies or something. And I'd be sitting there for 20 minutes and annoyed. And so I'd like took that step back. Well, I don't want to stop going to the movies with her. I don't want to stop being her friend. So what works better? I'm like, you know what? We'll meet at my house. So at least I'm at home doing the dishes, cooking something, playing with it, doing something, and I'm not just standing and waiting around. And when she gets there, and then we'll go. And for things like that. And that it wound up working. And that's okay. But it's like finding that balance, and then and interpreting into now, like showing my daughter, like, what can we do that works? And I try to have that conversation with her. I'm like, this is really not okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like starting my morning every morning stressed out like this. And when you're running late like this and running us against the clock, it stresses me out. So what can we do to do different?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I love that collaborative approach. And I would say to everyone listening, borrow that, right? And see where it goes, right? Because some kids are ready to engage in that kind of reflective and collaborative problem solving. And when they are, that's going to really launch the whole thing in a positive direction. For some kids, there's going to be limited capacity to reflect, or they have what would ideally work, but then in the moment it's not working, right? And so that's frustrating. Work with someone that can help you process that. Like, that's part of why I love doing caregiver support. Part of my job is to hold space for, this was so frustrating. Janelle, we've had this conversation a million times and we're getting nowhere, right? I want to hear the frustration. I want to hold that for families. And I also want to say, okay, so you've had this 1,000 times. That is really frustrating. It also seems, by the fact that you're having it 1,000 times, we're missing something. So now let's look back. Like, is this expectation doable for that kiddo? Is it a matter of figuring out a different support? Do we need to shift the expectation? Do we need to tap into community support? Like, maybe, mornings are hard for a lot of the families that we work with, right? Is there a grandparent? Is there a neighbor that can come if, can they be the plan B of, like, I need to leave and my child is not ready? Can there be some of that community support? Trying to get creative and flexible, tying in community. It helps. It's not a fail safe, but it gets us started.
Right. And that's where the village comes in. And it's so
Mhm.
true. It's like, what do you do? And that's, I mean, I will tell you now that my kids are old enough, it's that I can leave them home alone. Okay. You don't have to go. We're
Mhm.
out, The interesting thing is my younger daughter she did not like being alone, and she's
Mhm.
now starting to like being alone because she
Okay.
doesn't want to schlep out, especially like when I do carpool with the older ones. She used to, like, I didn't want to be alone, but now she's like, it's 20 degrees out, I don't want to go sit in the car for 20 minutes for no reason. Like, I got sleep, I'm good. you know and
Priorities.
find it right, exactly, and finding that priority and finding what works, because it's just, and it's different for everyone. And that's what I say. Like, people ask me, like, well, what placement do you suggest for a PDA child? And I'm
Mm.
like, well, I've had it work in the SESES program, I've had it work in Bridges, I've had it work in Connections, I've had it work in just straight gen ed, and I've had it work in non-public, and I've had it work in homeschool.
Mhm.
Depends, and, like, the lawyer answer, right? It depends. But it does, because, again, like, all the profiles are so different, and the needs for the child. And that's why, like, for me, I offer strategy sessions for my clients to talk through, because first, the needs of your child, second, the needs of you as a family, and what's realistic for you as a family. Some families can homeschool, some families can afford to do this, and some can't. So, okay, what's if this isn't realistic, this isn't going to happen, let's see what is and what options we have, and then go towards those options. Is it the best? No. But is every scenario going to be the best? No. But it's the best we have for now.
Mhm. Yeah, I so appreciate what you said about, like, you get asked a general question of, like, what would be the best placement for this type of kid, and your answer is, well, let's look at the kid, right? Not the diagnosis, not the label, right? Because there's, I mean, so much individuality, so many contributing factors. Like you said, some of it's going to be more systemic, some of it'll be family oriented, some of it's the child and as their own human being. And I think we need more of that spirit of, like, okay, let's increase societal understandings about what does it mean to be autistic, what does it mean to be a PDA, or what does it mean to be ADHD, what does it mean, right? Like, what does it mean, what does it mean? Let's have those, again, as starting places. These are the
Right.
general patterns that we can think are probably true, but let's, like, pencil it in, and then let's be in relationship with people. Let's figure out, oh, that preconceived notion I had based on people that were said to be similar, that one isn't right. They're different in this way, they're different in that way. Okay, great. Let's know people as human beings, in all their fullness, including neurotype, but also other factors, and really see people as individuals. And because that'll give us the clues of, like, how do you want to connect, how can you best reflect and advocate for yourself, because we do need that partnership. And if we just either say we're the expert and we have all the answers, or we assume that people need to communicate in one way, we're going to miss a lot, we're going to mess up a lot too.
Right. And it was just, I was thinking about, like, we teach our kids, our neurodiverse kids, and, like, why are we not out teaching the neurotypical kids? you
Amen.
know, like, and Hannah does that. Hannah has said before to people like, well, this is hard for me because I'm autistic,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. Because again, we're open about it. We don't want it. It's not shameful. There's nothing wrong with it. Your brain just works differently. And, of course my daughter's like, but mom, you say everybody's brain works differently. I'm like, I
Yes, they
know.
do.
And they do 100%, but there's different and there's different, and you're lucky enough to know how your brain works and know what works for you. And so like, let's live on that and see that, and giving the kids that empowerment of this is who I am and it's okay, and teaching the other kids of like, hey, when you see a kid doing this is what's going on for that kid. Not like, oh, that kid's weird. Why are they flapping their hands like that? That's weird. That's different. I don't want to be around it. This is
Right.
what's going on.
Abby Dabby has done wonders for us.
Yeah,
um,
exactly.
and yeah, no, I love that. I think you're so right when you were sharing the conversation that you and Hannah have had around like there's different and there's different, and I want to kind of expand on that because something that I have found helpful to teach kids is that like all neurodiversity is human traits just in different ratios. And so with the hand flapping example you just gave, right? I once was with a group of second graders in a gen ed class, and they were doing an activity with some kids in a self-contained class, and they had gotten to know some of the students reciprocally, and they started to ask, why does he do this? And I said, okay, have you ever like had a clicky pen and it just feels really good to click it? And they're like, yeah. And I said, have you ever seen your mom or dad like jiggle their leg up and down when they're sitting? Yeah. I said, so their body is doing the same thing over and over again, and it feels good and it helps them feel like good in their body. I said, he's doing the same thing. It's just the example is a little bit different. And they're like, oh, okay. Right. And when we talk about like monotropism in autistic people, non-autistic people have flow state, right? Like we may be more likely to experience it if we're neurodivergent, but like that can be a shared experience. And so like understanding that that like it's about different ratios. We're all experiencing the same traits in different ratios. And the funny thing is when I get asked like, how do I tell my child that they're neurodivergent? I usually lay it out as like, okay, well, are you talking about brains at all with your kids? And they're like, what? I was like, okay, so let's just start by modeling, noticing how brains are connected to things. I said, do not talk about your child. Like make it like a challenge to observe everyone except for your child, right? Because again, with the spotlight. Oh, I really like this story. It made sense in my brain. I really like this scent. It feels good for my body. My body's part of my brain, right? And you can tie likes, you can tie challenges, you can tie any part of life because all of our life is processed through our brain, right? And we tie it back to our brain. We tie it back to our brain. And then when that feels less kind of performative, then we can start adding in challenges. We can add in people on the street, movie characters when we're watching a family movie, right? And eventually we can start being like, hey, you're really good at that. Is that easy for your brain, right? We're going to start with the strengths. And then eventually we can introduce some conversation around like, hey, like, seems like you're having a hard time with this. Is this something that's tough for your brain, right? Now, after all of that modeling about everybody else, right? It's very like natural to be like, yeah. And you don't have to feel defensive about it, right? And then eventually we're like, okay, so you remember we went and we did that thing where you went to that building and you played some weird games with a psychologist? Yeah. So here's the thing. They wrote up a report, and I want to tell you some of the things that they found, and I want to hear if you think that they're true, right? And you read off the traits and the examples, and you receive the input from the kid, and then you go, okay, so this and this and this and this and this you said is true for you, right? Did you know that even though everybody's different, enough people have similarities like that their brain works in that way, that there's a whole group of you, and it's called insert whatever your neurotype is, right? And I love that kind of approach. It's quite long. And I think this is to your point, like, let's teach everyone this. Either we all end up with a lot of self-knowledge or we end up with self-knowledge and an understanding about other people. But what I love about this is it meets kids where they're at. And it also make sure that we are not just saying, oh, did you know you're an ADHDer? Or, oh, did you know you're autistic? And then they're like, wait, I don't actually know what that means. Oh, wait, I think there's that kid in school who behaves like that. And I feel this or that way about that. And they're adding their own associations and potentially misinformation. Instead, we've made them the expert of their experience and then given them a vocab word about it. Yeah.
I love that. And I'm like, okay, to-do list, have this conversation with my children. Like my children know,
Yeah.
but like we saw somebody, at one point in time, I'm like, oh, they're autistic. And she gave me this look like, but I don't act like that. I'm like, remember, it's a spectrum and there's lots of different ways it comes out. And, now I'm thinking of ways I could have said, this is how it comes out for them. You know how you do this? Well, they do this. And then, and then so like you can have the same, typical or whatever diagnosis. I hate that, but you know what I mean? But act differently because it comes out in different ways.
Definitely. And I think that's so important. Something that as a former special educator and then now a neurodiversity affirming therapist, part of my own like unlearning and relearning process was when I went to school, I was taught language like symptoms of insert neurotype, right? And now it's upended how I think about things to be like, no, 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 no. These are traits of a neurotype. Yes, there are some traits that are generally considered more strengths and some that are considered more support needs, but they're traits. They are part and parcel of how this brain makes sense of the world. And I totally lost my thread, but we'll just leave that there.
Yeah, no, that's perfect because like, yeah, when you hear symptoms, you hear there's a disease, there's something wrong. When you're like, this is a trait, we all have different traits, brown hair, black hair, and putting it that way, I love that because it just makes it, for me, works in the sense of helping our kids understand it. And like, I'm thinking along the lines of now, like when I explain it to the kids, now I'm empowering them with the language. When somebody says something to them about like, well, that's weird. Well, I'm autistic and my brain does this when that happens, and normalizing it and teaching somebody else.
Yes, I love that. I don't know if there's a way to put something in the show notes later, but I'd love to send you a video that's about 5 minutes that uses Legos to explain neurodiversity. Theoretically, it's for kids. I think that's a bit ambitious, but I love it. It talks about neurodiversity. It talks about different neurotypes. It talks about not in as many words, but the social model of disability. And it's fabulous. It's about 5 minutes. So I'll be sure to send that to you so you can hopefully share
definitely. We'll put the link. Yeah, we'll put that in the link when, like now we're live, but when Kevin does everything tomorrow, he'll make sure that link is there. I look forward to seeing it. I just watched one on PDA that was just so amazing. And I don't even remember where I saw it, but from PDAers explaining how their brain.
Oh, I want to see that.
I'll have to send that to you. I'll send it. I know. Yeah, I'll find it and send it to you. But like, it's on my Facebook page. Everybody, like Chef Law. But yeah, I put it there because it was just like, it was eye-opening for me. Even how much I know about PDA, it was hearing it from them and what it's like in their body. It's very eye-opening.
I love that. I think it was a hashtag a while back, but nothing about us without us, right? Yeah. Learning from people with lived experience. Really important.
Yeah, definitely. So before we wrap up, because I just noticed the time and I know we have other things, but before we wrap up, are there any important pointers that you want to give to parents, like with all of this that we talked about? I know we unpacked a very lot and talked about, but like when it comes to like coaching and neurodiversity and stuff for parents, are there any like really important pointers for parents?
So I think the first is building on the whole community that you've built here. Like, make sure you're finding community, because whether that's someone that gets you and your kids and you can let your guard down a little bit, whether it's someone that fills your cup, like we need to find ways to keep things sustainable and be in relationship. I'm not kidding. Like the power of a good belly laugh on a bad day, right? Like we are not meant to live in isolation. So keep finding your community. And as you're building that and you're finding opportunities, share that out, because so many people are lonely. So many people feel siloed and isolated. So definitely keep fighting the good fight on that one. Keep finding your people. That would be thing number one. Second is my first question when I hear something that I can't quite make sense of yet is, I wonder why that happened, right? A lot of people spring to, what do we need to do about it? Understandable. Totally. However, it's been more productive in my experience to get curious, what was going on? If we are operating under the assumption that all behavior is somebody's best attempt to meet an underlying need. And that doesn't mean that they actually met it, but it was their best attempt to try to meet it. What need were they trying to meet? What was going on? That's a really good starting place. And when something is baffling to you, try to just jot down the frequency of things, because often my starting place is, I wonder if there's a larger pattern that we can find here. So let's get some baseline data, both to try to find a pattern, and also because if we're setting a goal, we need to make sure that our baseline expectations are appropriate. Otherwise, we're going to get really frustrated with ourselves and our kids and not set ourselves up for success. So find your community, collect baseline data, and I've already forgotten what I said in the middle, but hopefully someone else was listening.
Yeah. And track it, I think
Yeah.
is what the third. Yeah, exactly. No, that was awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you, Janelle, for taking time out of your busy day to come share all of your words of wisdom with our listeners.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Thank you for building this community in this space. It was a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Stress Free IEP. We hope today's conversation gave you new tools, insights, or just a little more peace of mind as you support your neurodivergent child. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone in your village. Next week, I'm going to do a solo episode where I'm going to revisit the best shows and pointers that I learned that we've had throughout the year. So it's a don't miss it, because it'll summarize everything and maybe give you some ideas of things to go back episodes to listen to. And as always, you can always learn more about me and connect with me at schefterlaw.com or follow along on social media. Until next time, remember, you do not have to do it all alone.